domestic debt exchange, if the question it's about cocoa bills, that's for sure. We're going to do that. About the domestic debt, the US dollar denominated domestic debt, we are going to do that. So that's for certain.
Ken Oforiatta is of the view government activities on the treasury bills market is not defeating the purpose of the domestic debt exchange program.
Not when you have moved from 35% to 20. Do you get me? So you are gradually finding a way in which you are reducing the rates. It can't just kind of drop like that. But that's a huge change of 15.5 percentage points. And as our revenue base gets stronger, we should be able to reject prices that do not fit the bill. But it will take a while to gradually bring it to where we can support it in the long term.
And it looks like a good starting point. And this put matters into perspective. It looks like we're starting on a very good footnote with the IMF.
Well, I guess that the whole purpose of us going to the IMF was to try and resuscitate the economy that was suffering, primarily as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war and the COVID pandemic. Whether you like it or not, it's an undisputable fact that these two global events aggravated, our economic situation, because it's not like everything was kosher before COVID, and that's the fact that government had made some significant expenditures that was already biting, because if you follow the budgets of 2019-2020, it was clear. Even the below the line reporting itself that was introduced in the picture clearly showed an economy that had issues. Of course, it wasn't as grave. It was manageable. And then you have this global pandemic that then hits. And so you take a decision that, look, in order to enable you resuscitate your economy, bring some stability in your finances, get some support in terms of forex and all that, it was important for you to go to the IMF to go through this program, which is essentially a program that was developed by ourselves. Post-COVID PEG was indicated in the budget, I believe, in 2021, 2022. And so that is a program that was submitted to the IMF for the IMF to, as it were, support us in its implementation. And obviously, following the approval of the IMF program, the finance minister, I believe it was appropriate for him to update Ghanaians on where we are and the clear signs that we are beginning to see. It's early days yet. I'm not sure that only 1 month would, lead to the kind of results that we want. But with the requisite discipline that is indicated, government is going to put in our public financial management system and all that, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to turn the economy around. Hopefully, by the close of the year, we'll see much more, impact, in terms of the program, and continue next year, and hopefully in 2025, after we break the 8, with His Excellency the Vice President Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia being the flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party, inshallah, by the grace of God, when we go through our presidential processes, beginning next month through to end November. I'm very, very, very hopeful.
And you are the economist here. What the communication was, the refrain, that the program will see some level of assurances being given to our partners, whether bilateral or just the normal market partners. Was it that our expectations were too high, or that it's just a normal process when you take on this pact with the IMF or any of these Bretton Woods institutions?
Well, yeah. So, good morning to our viewers. Good morning. What I will say is that, you see, usually going to IMF is not as if we don't know what we are doing as a country. Most of the time, government implementing what is so difficult for Ghanaians may have to go through the IMF to get it done. And as my, colleague on the platform was saying, you know, it was our own package we sent to IMF that this is what we intend to do. This is what we can do to get back the economy on track. And so effectively, if you look at it carefully, all the things that has been indicated in the prior actions that we're supposed to, you know, achieve before the program, we get a second tranche. For me, it's almost at hand. Because if you look at the negotiations that we're supposed to do on our debt exchange, you know, the debt exchange that we had, if you look at, you know, the restructuring we're supposed to start, the support that we got from, you know, the bilateral, you know, countries, creditors and all those, clearly tells you that we had started something. That should also tell you that, yes, at our own will, probably we couldn't have, you know, implemented most of the actions that, you know, the IMF, that we propose to IMF that we intend to do. So we normally, I mean, when government tends to see kind of difficulty, which at the end of the day, for political expediency, they may not want the people to feel that they are the ones implementing, you know, the program. They go behind IMF and turn up to, you know, position themselves to say that, yes, we were facing difficulty, but then external, you know, hands is indicating clearly to us that we should do A, B, C, D. Now, if you look at the, what do we call it, you listen to the finance minister very well, and then the commentary that we've started realizing, you know, some kind of gains as a result of the program. I would say it's too early. Of course, I mean, as a finance manager, you may want to keep a positive kind of sentiment to send a signal that we are, you know, doing well. But then effectively, it's too early yet because inflation, which was one of the main indicators you mentioned, I mean, it started lifting itself up somewhere in May. We don't know what June will look like. Exchange rate stability, I would say yes, it was expected because I mean, any rational, you know, holder of, you know, dollar will know that okay, once we get in, you know, money from IMF, obviously the reactions on the market when it comes to demand, definitely there could be, you know, money available to meet up, you know, those demands. So for me, the lens that, you know, the IMF, you know, I mean, a team that visited the country.
Was it last week or two?
Yes, last week. The lens they are using is more or less at a macro, you know, perspective. We are yet to see a clear impact of our visit to IMF on interest rates. And of course, we know very well that when interest rate comes down, it feeds into all other, you know, things. Accessibility to, you know, money in the banking hall, you know, the rate at which funds exchange hands, you know, to get to the ordinary level. And so if you gauge the economy at the macro level, you may say that, yes, indeed, we've achieved some gains as a result of, you know, this, what do we call it, IMF engagement. But it may not necessarily be, you know, the case, you know, because if you look at what sends us to IMF, right, it took us a while. And from where I sit and my understanding of economics, any decision you pick, any policy that you take, the effect shouldn't be 3 weeks or 1 month, you know, interval. I mean, let me be honest to, you know, our listeners and then my colleagues on the panel. So effectively, I say it's too early yet, but I understand him anyway as a finance minister because he doesn't want to throw anything negative out there. But
he's a political figurehead, so he needs to show that as well.
Of course, I mean, he's wearing two hats. I mean, he needs to find a balance in a way.
Okay. Now, Edwin, there are critical issues that the finance minister did make. He says that we need to create that level of support for the program that we have with the IMF, so that the the resurgence of the economy could be at a position where, or at a place where everybody will feel comfortable and the burden will be lifting off. Because consistently, there are people who will now somehow have experiences of power outages because either the credit they bought has run out, and it's all linked to affordability and what they can in their pocket. So at least from your side of the political divide, what kind of support can you give the finance minister? And why should you give that support or not?
So once again, good morning to my seniors here. You see, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia once said something. He said, when in doubt, observe the exchange rates.
Why is that important here?
It's important because all other things essentially evolves around the conversation around the exchange rates. And so, if the finance minister is telling us to have a positive outlook of the economy, what we should be asking is, what has been the impact of this program relative to the stability of the city? All other things are immaterial. And I think that this our finance minister, if he has any decency left in him, he should be leaving that office. Because you see, the pain, the suffering that you are going through today is as a result of his recklessness. The signs were on the wall. Because we were not Joseph in the Bible to interpret dreams, he never listened. Look, if as a government, you come to office in 2017, and by April, you had already reached out to Franklin Templeton for $2.25 billion. By 2018, you were doing another 2 billion now Eurobond. By 2019, you were doing almost 3 billion Eurobond. By 2020, COVID year, you did 2 billion. 2021, again. The only time that you didn't do Eurobond was 2022, simply because of the downgrades.
But Duji, somebody
No,
will say
hold on.
No, somebody will say that we've passed that, so just leave.
We've not. Because these are the fundamental issues. Your debt is there.
You mean the causative factor?
Yeah, the cause is there. The fundamentals. So until you reach out and resolve the fundamental issues, nothing will happen. Look, we've gotten 600 million come into the economy. And we are still doing exchange rates beyond 11.90. What has been the impact? Initially, they were telling us that, oh, the CD depreciation is speculative. Today, you have brought in $600 million into the economy. And it has not had any positive impact on the depreciation of the city. And you see, if today you rank about 54 countries in Africa, Ghana has the third highest inflation. In fact, the only country out of 54 that we have defeated is Sudan and Zimbabwe. That is the scorecard that we are dealing with. We are only better than Sudan and Zimbabwe. Now, when you are the manager of an economy and the scorecard you post after 7 years managing the economy is an inflation rate of 42%, what you do is you don't read scriptures. You bow your head down in shame. Look, when you tell people that I am competent, that give me the benefit of power, and I'll make life better than you, and after 7 years, with more financial resources than any other administration post 1992, and your scorecard is that you are dealing with interest rates almost getting to 43%. Because if you add the 29 plus the bank charges and other, you are doing almost 43%. Where in God's name can you do a legitimate business as a private person when you are having to borrow and the cost of borrowing is almost getting to 40-something percent?
You know that even if you reach the IMF, and I have this
yes.
IMF.
Yeah, go ahead.
the IMF does acknowledge that we have the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, global financial conditions, and Russia's war in Ukraine, exacerbating the fiscal and debt vulnerabilities that we have. Forget about what they talk about pre-existing vulnerabilities.
No. How can you forget? The man is telling you that, listen carefully, your lifestyle has resulted in a situation where you have underlying conditions. And so far, you have not demonstrated that you want to move away from that lifestyle. And you say, I should be hopeful. Hopeful on what indicators? So for instance, if government is telling me that inflationary pressures coming from food, and these are the policy initiatives to ensure that there will be greater production of food, cheaper food, to bring the inflationary pressure down, then we can have that hope. If government is now blaming dog meat for your inflationary pressures, you want us to be hopeful, dog meat.
No, it's just one of the items
But they
in the
said
food
it.
basket.
But they said it. That's the point I want to
You mean
make.
the Saskal said?
Yes.
Yes, they did. But it's
And
just
I want
one
to
of the
rely
items.
on that conversation. And I'm saying that if today your onion is coming from Burkina Faso, if your tomatoes is coming from Burkina Faso, and even Burkina Faso is doing inflation less than 10%, then the inflationary pressure is not being imported. It is your own problem. If it is the case that it is costing more. But you see, like Bamia said, when in doubt, observe the exchange rate. You know where the problem is. We have not only, the city has not only depreciated in terms of the major foreign currency, even the CFA. So if you go to Tudu, our mothers who go to Togo to buy items, ask them, how much today? So you need to look, and like Prof said, you begin to look at the micro implication of those policies. And at the micro level, the people are beginning to appreciate that we are getting to Christmas. This is the time they do their orders for Christmas purchases.
What did you wrap up for me?
I will. So all these Christmas purchases, they are doing heavy purchases now. They are doing all their orders now. And so you can see where the impact is going to come from. And if in June, your exchange rate per the dollar terms is 11.90, then you say we should be hopeful. What will be the basis of the hope? What will be the basis?
Now,
And so I think the point ought to be made clear. And interestingly enough, my senior brother, Honorable Mesa, was saying that, the usual refrain, Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine. When are you going
but is
to
it
take,
not true?
please,
Even the IMF acknowledges that.
exacerbated? What it means is that there were conditions.
Okay. Now,
At least for an economist, you would have done some regression analysis and do impact so that you say that of the problem, the contributing factors, Russia, Ukraine has contributed, say, 50% to the current problem. You have not done any such thing because you know that any investigation would expose your own involvement and incompetence.
Mr.
That is
Jacob,
what is stopping the problem.
If you listen to the finance minister, there are key considerations that he makes, and he talks about efforts made based on policy direction in the PCPEC, as agreed with the IMF, which also could affect or not affect, or rather improve social intervention policies. And we know that the government has been very heavy on social intervention policies since 2017. The key considerations that have been talked about by the academics, those in the business community, etc., that if you want to cut costs, which ideally becomes the most prudent thing to do, you have to look at the tweaking of these social intervention policies so that they don't increase your budget line or items. If you look at the PCPEC, which social intervention policies that the government is heavy on have really been changed by way of their financing, which could bring costs down?
Roland, it's important that, when we are having a conversation on what it is that government is rolling out to improve the economy, you will always have at the back of your mind the vulnerable. Okay, and so I was trying to pull a document to show you what the cost of all the social intervention policies amount to vis-a-vis 3 line items. Okay, in terms of the financial sector costs that you incurred, the energy sector payments that you had to make, which has also generated its own set of debate, and also the COVID expenditure. Those 3 items, if you add all the social intervention policies that government has rolled out in the past, it doesn't come anywhere close.
You are saying the social intervention policies
so that's
pale
why
against by way of
complete
it.
insignificance. That's why you see in the program that the finance minister, the PCPEG,
Yes.
Increasing capitation grant, increasing
The LIP.
the school feeding
The LIP.
program, the amount of money that is going there, LEAP, is being improved, increased, and all that. Because you have a huge segment of your population that are vulnerable, for which you have to put in measures to protect. And so, yes, conversation around free SHS and its targeting and all that, I'm sure that in the coming days we'll get some detail, okay, as to whether the suggestion right from the very beginning, which cabinet opted against, in terms of people who attend private basic schools, okay, when they go to public secondary schools, which is far cheaper than what they pay in private basic schools, should be made to pay, you know, for their SHS education and all that. I mean, all those considerations were tabled, and government took a decision that, look, if you're rolling out a program that is for the benefit of all Ghanaians, roll it out for everybody to be a beneficiary. Of course, there's conversation about review and all that, and so we'll see. But look, like Prof said, and I agree with him entirely, it's not an event, okay? These programs, when the NDC in 2015 signed on to the IMF program, 18 months after implementation, the program had completely derailed. And so you want to go through the same process? Obviously not. That's why working groups have been set, okay, 5 or 6 of them, to meet weekly to ensure that we monitor and roll out the program successfully. Because if we're able to do
that
it,
we're on track.
Absolutely. If we're able to successfully implement the PCPEG, Ghana can only be the beneficiary. It is going to help our country. And so it's important that we stay focused and stop this doomsday prophecy and nothing can come out of Kenoforiata and all that. But the fact still remains that this is the man who, when he came into government, put the IMF program that you had derailed completely back on track. Ghana's economy was growing at an average of 7% year on year, 2017, 18, 19. Why? We want to wish those ones away. You talk of debt. And you see, it's interesting why we do this, our politics this way. Sometimes
Which of the debt
it's,
are you talking about?
oh, he mentioned that Franklin templating and all that. When we came into government, you didn't have any money that was sitting to even pay your bills that were accruing immediately. These are matters of fact. Recall when Mr. Mahama was president and the MPP was making reference to the debt accumulation. He told us that the debt were all, they had assets. You recall?
I do.
What has changed? What has changed? So let's be consistent. Look, we've had issues, no doubt about that. Because otherwise, what the vice president said, the exchange rate will expose you. It was true then. It was true today. That's why it's become necessary for us to resort to the IMF to try and save the situation. But I'm saying that
So
you
the
cannot.
exchange rate has exposed.
Oh, no, of
us.
course. I mean, look, if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. It's a matter of fact. It's true. Why is it a false statement?
No, it's not.
Why are we not being exposed? Because the truth of the
Especially-
matter
when
is
you
that.
say we, who are you talking
Oh, I'm talking about the government,
Okay.
Ghana. Okay,
At least
there's
I-
no, I'm not afraid to speak to the issues as they are. Okay, and I'm not about to be inconsistent when the facts speak for themselves. The truth of the matter is that if we didn't have economic issues today, nobody will be going to the IMF. So the fact that we've gone to the IMF itself is an admission of government's issues that he has with the economy. And question is, what caused us to get to the point where we've gotten to? And when you tell the good people of this country that, look, as the IMF document that you yourself were reading alluded to, it's not as if we didn't have issues. And I made it right from the very beginning, the very point about the below-the-line reporting, which the finance minister introduced in the budget of 2019, I believe, which clearly indicated the significant expenditures that had been made unplanned, but you needed to necessarily do it, which then impacted your economy in a certain way.
The financial
sector, clean up the energy sector payments and all that. You needed to do it, because if you hadn't done it, what would have been the consequences?
At the time, I
So,
remember,
I'm saying
while not
that
breaking your
these were
thoughts, at the
issues.
time, government consistently was advised or counselled that in order for us to situate our finances very well, then that also gives a picture domestically to those who are observing in academia business, and then also internationally, the reporting should be done right. And the government also in itself needs to admit that I'm not doing things right. The government was very much adamant.
What reporting needs to be get right are you making reference to?
The underreporting.
There was no underreporting. In fact, if you recall, the country director of the IMF at the time, Tuna Mama, when John Jirapo issued his statement, Adongo and co, my good friends, alleging that there was some misreporting.
You mean they were lying?
Yeah, of course, they were. The IMF country director came out clearly to indicate that, look, they were aware of all the figures. Indeed, it is the same budget document that contained the information about the below-the-line reporting. How can you accuse somebody who has provided you information, explain the information and document to you that he was misreporting? It wasn't contained in another document. It was in the same budget. Government took a position that, look, these were not regular budget cycle items that I incur every time. And I still maintain.
Are they now regular budget cycle items now? Because
let me make my point. I still maintain that those below the line reporting should have been kept to date until you amortize that obligation and take it on the book.
So why is the finance minister doing otherwise?
So you take a decision that. So it's a question of how you report.
Whose pressure? IMF
no,
pressure?
It's not a question of. It's not a question of IMF pressure. Well, it could be. I don't.
But
I don't have any
you
issues.
wouldn't have.
But look, the inclusion of those extraordinary expenditures into the books, okay, was done before the IMF program started.
Yes, of course.
It wasn't even part of the prior actions. It was a decision that was taken that, look, you can distinguish your debt in a certain way as you want, but it still remains your debt. And so put it together and then deal with it. And of course, that's what decision that the government took. But I'm saying that you cannot have any conversation about the management of the economy and discount those critical expenditures that led to your debt position being the way it is. You can't take it out.
Right.
Okay? So let's be consistent, let's be clear. The issues are being dealt with, and like I said, the signs are clearly showing. It's early days, but give or take, if we're able to successfully roll out the program that we have agreed with IMF, I'm certain that we will get out of the woods and put the economy back on track.
Please, don't itch.
Very well.
No, so if you look at what he says energy sector debts, and then of course the ones with the take-or-pay agreement that become topical issues. Perhaps maybe he will answer that very soon. The social intervention program subsequently. It means that we at least need not blame the government entirely or fully at all. It has to be some external extenuating factors.
Yeah, that's indeed true. But then let's look at this. You see, many a times we look at the drivers of our debt, right? Where we attribute it to expenditure. We look at, government reading budget and possibly putting up a huge budget deficit, which needs to be financed from the market. What triggers this? Is it in as much as we appreciate that these hard economic indicators have impact on our debt accumulation, we should also appreciate that there's what we call socio-political drivers of our debt, which usually it is difficult to measure, difficult to quantify, to say that, somebody's interest, right, has triggered this borrowing. possibly, somebody's business involvement has been part of, this, kind of, debt accumulation. Very difficult, but we shouldn't throw it away.
Why?
That the fact that, there are some hard economic, drivers of our debt. There are also some, socio-political interests. One of them is corruption. Go around the country, right? Look at, uncompleted projects, and then take a stock of them, and then relate it to our debt. Discontinuation of project.
What are the implications?
The implications on them. Look, a particular regime will start project. The next government comes. They say, that's not a project. We're starting a new one. Serving the same Ghanaians, set of Ghanaians, the same people. And we forget that every now and then, this kind of interest that we parade around our economic management are the ones that are driving, our, debt accumulation. Now, effectively, if you come to, the social programs, which, the IMF program seeks to protect, the vulnerable out of it. For me, no doubt about that. There's going to be serious pressure. And with, such pressure, you always need, some kind of protection for the, vulnerable. But we have a program that, the program seeks to tighten monetary policy. If you look at the details of the monetary aspect of the entire engagement.
The PCPEC.
Yes. You come to understand that one hand, the program is indicating that we should tighten monetary policy. On the other hand, the program wants to enhance revenue generation, looking at raising our, tax revenue from 15% of our GDP to about 18.5%, which is front-loaded. So in the immediate term, there's going to be that kind of pressure of, pushing Ghanaians to pay more for whatever.
Same Ghanaians?
Yes, for whatever services, they tend to seek, or whatever goods they tend to purchase. So effectively, if you look at it carefully, this introduction of taxes would turn up to, kind of pass through price hikes to the market. And if you tighten monetary policy, what are you doing? So you see the recent inflation that, we saw going up.
The marginal spark.
Exactly.
They say it's temporal.
It's not. I see inflation turning out to be fighting inflation turning out to be a stalemate. In a sense that, one hand, we are trying to raise revenue through taxes. And whatever, tax you introduce, there will be a pass-through effect of price hikes.
Energy,
On the other hand,
everything.
yes. On the other hand, we tend to use, monetary policy tightening to bring down inflation. So you're fighting it up and you're fighting it up. So, fighting it down. Effectively, it will stabilize. So I won't be surprised to the end of the year we're going to struggle. And looking at the way, these policies are front-loaded, especially the revenue generation. Because if you look at the sequencing of the numbers, clearly you could see that the first 2 years increased by 1%, latter years 0.5, which, softened the situation a bit. But if you relate the two, clearly you come to understand that in the next 1.5 to the next 1 year to 1.5, we're going to struggle in beating down inflation. So I don't want the finance minister to raise hope by using inflation as a benchmark, in telling Ghanaians that we've achieved a certain, target. It's early days yet. We have to appreciate that and look at how, things will unfold in the next. And then let me also chip in this. You see, the first tranche that we got, right, it seems to be like an emergency tranche. Because if you look at, the market very well and the conditions, right, we presented to IMF that we want to restructure our debt. But at the time that we were getting the first tranche, we just had, a kind of statement from our creditors that they are in support of the program. And as a result of that, we got the first tranche. They know the dire consequence if we were not to get it, the first 600 million. let me tell you, it should be a fact.
You mean
here.
they didn't want a potential
Because
child?
yes, of course, they know the
derail.
dynamics of sovereign debt and the possibility of getting into a ditch where sometimes we cannot even pay going forward. So they knew it. And if you look at how China came together with France and all those,
The Paris Club, yes.
the Paris Club clearly tells you that yes, of course, they know the experience from Greece, experience from Zambia, and all
Argentina
those.
and
To a
all those
certain
places,
threshold, right? Just to a certain threshold, you may not be able to pay them at all. And so, with their experience, I mean, I think a word of mouth, even from the US, to the IMF, I mean, we got the first tranche. But trust me, the third tranche, the second tranche is almost at hand because all the conditions we provided, clearly, we almost provide. It's like, I mean, we're already on them. But the third and the fourth tranche, subsequent to that, we may have to be careful because, this is more or less an emergency tranche that we got.
I see Mesa is laughing here. Nobody can see him.
And you see, when Prof talks about the emergency release, remember that barely a week to the board approval, the finance minister and the governor actually sent an emergency letter to the IMF board that the economy was at the verge of collapse. And that without the 600 million,
You mean the economy was having difficulties?
No, was at the verge of collapse. In fact, they
When did you sign that letter that we have a
please,
verge of
please,
collapse?
please. The two of them
Lawyer,
were in
he
Washington.
who alleged must not.
What
So
am
show
I-
us the letter.
What am I proving? There's no need to prove anything. You know it.
I don't.
Hold on, please.
Prof, are you aware of any such letter?
A week.
I know
The
that
two
was
governors, the governor
unbelievable, eh?
and then the finance minister, were at the Washington and indicated that we're in an emergency situation. In fact, our import cover has reduced to barely 2 weeks.
a week.
And had then indicated that without this money, and that is why you notice that it is now that we are even working on the memorandum of understanding and others with the various, creditors. But you see, the most important thing that we are missing in this conversation is that you see, anytime our friends speak, they create the impression
If you
that,
say friends, what do you mean?
I mean, our friends in the MPP speak. They create the impression that, we are already ready for an IMF condition or conversation.
But aren't we ready?
No.
If we
Look,
weren't ready, how did the Paris Club, China, the rest
First
of the
all,
bilateral
first of
partners
all,
and creditors give us the go-ahead?
You saw
for us to be where we
the
are?
arrogant posturing of our friends, even in starting the IMF conversation.
You mean the initial denials?
The
and-
denials.
Okay.
Some people being called IMF small boys, among other things. Thankfully, today, humility has dawned on us. We are dealing with the small boys. Clap for them. But even more important, look, when we kept telling them that do a simple audit of your COVID-19 expenses, our friends said no. Even when there was a kind of, parliamentary conversation by the minority for an audit of the whole COVID expenses, our friends said no. But do you know that July the 1st, when the president announced that they were going to the IMF, immediately the president made the announcement. As part of meeting the staff level agreement, one of them was to audit COVID. Immediately they agreed to do the audit of COVID-19 expenses. And the audit clearly demonstrated that of the COVID monies that came, right, we spent about 500 million Ghana cedis outside GIPMIS. Prof alluded to the point of corruption. Now, we do know that in terms of public financial management, one of the tools to trace, to ensure transparency and others, is the issue of the GIPMIS system. So if government, headed by Akufo-Addo and Bawumia, decide that they will spend 500 million of COVID money outside GIPMIS, clearly the motive is there.
We were in an emergency
No,
situation.
it has nothing to do with emergency.
Because
There
it
have
was
been
that same
other-
year we
Please,
even
hold on.
suspended the
Please.
fiscal
It
responsibility.
has nothing to do with all those issues. The fiscal responsibility is just about not doing 5% of your, what do you call it, the deficit. Without it, nothing more. I am saying that even for your own expenditure, you put in a GIPMIS system to allow you to monitor. You decided to spend 500 million of COVID money without going through that system. a system that is to check transparency, a system that is to account for accountability. What will be the motivation? And these are things that have been superintended by Mr. Akufo-Addo and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. But you see, curiously, in this whole conversation, it has become clear that COVID created what has now become known as the COVID profiteers. Persons who decided to profit from the pandemic. And from the Auditor General's report, the Auditor General appointed by Mr. Akufo-Addo himself, he makes the point that to the point that government officials were now paying or demonstrating expenditure for COVID using honor certificates. Which one of us here, managing a business, will say that he wants to use honor certificates? It's like word of mouth. So the point ought to be made clear that our government was never ready. They were living in a different reality until it became clear that we were in an intensive care unit. My friend here says that, oh, before COVID, they were doing so well and alluded to growth rate and others. By 2017, when you were putting up that growth rate, what serious policy initiative have you put in place? In economics, we all do know that there's something called policy lag. So that the policies undertaken by a government, the real impact will be felt sometimes 6 months, a year after policy implementation.
Within the financial cycle.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you come in 2017 and you had not put in place any major policy programs, in fact, what you did is to spend, and you achieve a certain growth rate, why would you want to say you are the cause? When we do know that contribution from oil on that economic growth, that is, you can easily disaggregate the non-oil growth. What was the non-oil growth? The real growth rate came from investment you inherited. What is wrong saying that, yes, of course, I inherited A, B, C, D conversation, and this is where it has got into. You see, when the Honorable Deputy Minister was speaking, he created the impression that, oh, you know what, take or pay, excess capacity payments are the cause. But you see, in 2019, they themselves signed the Energy Recovery Program. And if you read portions of the recovery program, their own documents, this is what it says. Non-payment of electricity bills by ministries, departments, and agencies. ECG has lost over $180 million of revenue annually because of non-payment. Of this amount, $150 million or 80% is from non-payment by MDAs. Government has accumulated over 1.3 billion dollars or 47% of the total in arrears to the energy sector, making it the single largest debtor to the sector. So you don't pay. Your ministry, departments, and agencies are using power. They are not paying. And they are saying that that is contributing about 47% of your debts. Now, the same document now says technical and commercial losses. The overall technical and commercial losses in the power sector were...
What's your point with this?
The point I'm making is that 23% in 2018, costing $400 million annually, with the transmission of distribution system operator from ECG to PDS, blah, 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 blah. What it gives you is that they decided to disaggregate the various causes to the debt within the particular sector.
All right.
And in all of this conversation, they don't tell us. Look at your own document saying that electricity reduction implemented in March 2018 resulted in revenue losses to ECG, NETCO, and GRIDCO, as reflected in their 2018 financial statement. So if you put all of this together, government's own recklessness is also part of the problem. Because in March 2018, you decided for no reason to reduce tariffs. And when you did the tariff for political reasons, right, it started accumulating. You'll be paying power and nobody is paying for it.
All right.
So these are the problems. So let's be fair to the conversation. I want an honest, holistic conversation on these issues.